Welcome to Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. My guest today is Paul Havermale, co-chair of the Housing Task Force for the City of Quincy. Good to see you.
Good to see you as always.
So the meetings are perking right along. Do you feel you're making headway?
I think so. The scope of the issue is such that it's going to take some time. We had to cut it into some, if you want to say, bite-sized or manageable pieces. So we've created a few subcommittees to do that. And we're just kind of working through a number of issues, trying to make sure we're being thorough.
So you're trying to solve the problem of insufficient housing in a certain price range, correct?
Sort of.
Okay.
That's part of what our mission is. I think that's been a bit of a misnomer because of some of the quotes that were said at meetings and things like that. We're not really concentrating on one particular level of housing and rental or purchase. There are some sweet spots where the shortages exist more so than others, but we are looking at all price levels and price ranges, and because it all works together. We found that what happens at this level of pricing affects the next level of pricing because it doesn't open up and it doesn't turn those units as quickly as they used to years ago. So unfortunately, there were some quotes out there about a specific price range or specific rent range, and that's accurate, but it really is a holistic approach and a holistic look at everything.
There's also just the issue of trying to find the space to do what needs to be done, because again, when some people don't want housing developments in their backyard, and some people would like to be able to perhaps build a house that they might make a little more money on, but a house that's needed in a certain price range might not make that contractor any money. What can really be done to change those things?
Well, there's a couple things. In the residential areas, in targeted areas of the city, particularly the downtown residential areas, which we've done, our data group has done some extensive legwork on that. They've taken a sample that went across 3 wards. It wasn't all of the wards, but it was I think it was a 2-block by 5-block area that they did a sampling of things like abandoned houses, dilapidated houses, or empty lots. We feel that that's, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit, where if we can make that feasible for a developer to develop on those lands, it does a number of things. It puts something back on the tax rolls. It gives us units that we need. But today, to build a single-family house on those, it really isn't economically feasible for what they can charge for the house. So what we're looking at, one of the things we're looking at, and this kind of gives you an example of how we're addressing some of those needs, is in those areas, can we make it to where, as a matter of right, in those particular residential areas, not the entire city, not the entire city.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, gotcha.
In targeted areas, you could build up to maybe a triplex, most likely a duplex. You get some economy of scales, and the return on investment makes it much more attractive to a developer to build. That's one thing. On the larger multifamily development, an apartment complex or something like that, we're looking at trying to find areas in the city or in the mile and a half or in the city that make sense, that we can rezone some areas that would allow that in areas that are less controversial or would not quite meet so much resistance. You're right. I mean, neighborhoods have a characteristic, and people don't like to see their neighborhood change, and we're sensitive to that. But at the same time, whether we think it's propaganda or not, data and studies show us we have a growing housing problem. We either address it or we don't. And that's, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the city council, the administration, and the city, the residents of the city to decide if we do address it.
But when you talk about that, and again, a housing problem, whether it's a shortage or what have you, does that rely on a growing population?
Well, it's kind of a cart before the horse discussion. Okay,
egg?
Chicken egg, yeah, exactly. Are we not growing because we don't have units. We know our employers have told us, the Greta study tells us this emphatically, that they have job openings, but they can't fill some of them because they don't have reasonable places for, in many cases, reasonable housing for their potential employees. So what comes first? I mean, you know, I know the comment's always going to be, well, we live in Illinois, we have a net reduction in population every year, we're a border town and all that kind of thing. But I guess my answer to that or response to that would be, so do we just don't try? I mean, what do we do? I believe that if we increase our housing stock at certain levels and look at all levels as we're working through the process, it allows our employers to hopefully expand. It allows our population to hopefully come back. I hope it does, and I would think it would. And then that does a number of things. It gets those properties that we're talking back on the property tax rolls, because let's face it, the only way you're going to offset rising taxes is to grow population. Or conversely, your government entities have to have wholesale layoffs because most of their expense is people. So I've been on a lot of sides of that in my adult life here, and I think the best thing that we can try first is to try to make it an environment where our population has the opportunity to grow. And I think addressing the housing issues is a very small first step in that.
Well, I think though when it comes to the employers, I mean, if they really want somebody, you know, bad enough, I don't know if the housing issue is really the stumbling block. I mean, usually money solves that problem.
Well, good point.
So, you know, offer a little higher salary and maybe they can figure it out.
I'm not going to tell people how to run their business
No,
and
not
all
at
that, but there is, you know, if you look at the Greta study, and a lot of what we're doing is based on that, of course, because that's the data we have. They predicted by 2033 we would need 1,590 new housing units, or 1,590 additional housing units. In
what range was that? In any range?
They were at any range, but they were predominantly in that mid $100,000 to $200,000 purchase price range. Mm-hmm. So that tells me, well, the other side of the data is if you look at data from the city and from the community needs assessment that United Way put together, our building permits are going down. So we have if the data is to be believed, and I think it is, you have a rising need and reduction of new units. So the prudent thing to do for any government entity or anybody that cares about our area, in my mind, would be that we at least have the conversation. Because at the end of the day, the Housing Task Force isn't going to solve anything. We're going to make recommendations that go to the City Council and to the administration, and they're going to make the final decision.
But I think also with just when you're trying, the population issue is the big thing. You know, obviously we have been 40,000 or less for years. We had a little spike, then went back down. And again, like you said, a lot of people just kind of blame the state and say, hey, I'm going to go move across the river, what have you. And again, I think we have to see some movement in the school enrollment numbers too, I would think, because that's certainly also not trending in the right direction
exactly.
either.
And I agree. I think the housing's a small part of that, but it is a part of it. And I do agree with you, you know, what solves a lot of the issues we have with every local government, no matter if it's city, county, school district, whatever it is you grow the pool. So again, I would come back and I would submit that, you know, just saying, well, there's nothing we can do.
Right.
That's not an option. I'm sorry. If that's an option for people, you know, that's short-sighted at best and you know, dangerous for the health of your community.
But if your largest employers are telling you that they need more people and they are saying this is a reason we can't bring more people, sure, it makes sense to address that. But that being said, I don't know if that's the entire issue.
It absolutely is not the entire issue. I think you have a number of issues. I think you hit some of it. Some of it's the pay scale, maybe. It could be things like amenities that are here. Do people, you know, also all those things play into people coming here. But you have to start somewhere, and the thing that is reasonable, in my opinion, for the city to start at is to create an environment that is friendly to development, especially in the housing markets. We're pretty friendly to business development here, I think, you know, and But I think one of the things, no, I don't think, I know, one of the things we're looking at the Housing Task Force is, can we take that mindset and apply it towards housing without deciding winners and losers on a big scale?
Right.
Without deciding who makes money and who doesn't. That's not government's role, and that's not the role of the task force.
Well, again, I think it's, it is. If you're a developer and, you think you can build houses for X amount that makes your company money, that's what you're going to do. You're not going to build a subdivision full of houses that you don't think is going to be able to generate the profit you want to grow your business.
Absolutely not. And one thing we've learned too through the process, and again, in my professional life, I've dealt with developers of every ilk, every size, residential, business, commercial, industrial, all those kind of things. And I'm amazed at times how little movement in cost or incentive can make the project go or not go. You would be amazed about how little bit of money. I'll use the GROW program that the county had. It was a very successful program to address residential shortages. They did $20,000 a unit, and I believe they ended up doing $600 and some thousand out of the $1 million that were leveraged and created, I think, 53 or 60 some units.
Yeah.
So that 20,000, which I know this is going to sound a little crazy, it doesn't sound like a lot of money when you're talking about maybe a $100,000 project or something like that. But that 20,000 then makes it feasible. Mm-hmm. We found the same thing when we had the rental rehab program downtown here in Quincy. I was on one of the committees with that, and that 20,000 made a number of those projects doable that weren't doable without it. Mm-hmm. And what those two programs have done about getting properties on the tax rolls and productive again, and additional properties on the tax rolls, goes exactly to what people say is the problem of rising property taxes and rising, Right. So, I mean, but they were extremely successful, and I hope that they're all, can continue, especially the rental rehab program, in my mind, needs to be revisited.
Well, and I think the county, the county made a concerted effort to put that $1 million in place and leave it in place because that was part of the COVID money they were able to
right,
do.
ARPA money, yeah.
And so I think that the ability to do that gave them, surely, in this state that people like to complain about, there's some sort of similar programs out there at the state level that could be filtered down to maybe also assist with this problem.
Yeah, and we're exploring all of those, any grant opportunities, any housing opportunities, and there are more coming out. There's some coming out at the federal level. There's some housing and homeless initiatives coming out, some large dollars coming out of the Department of Veterans Affairs and for veteran-specific housing, which I'm a little bit sensitive to.
Sure.
But there are a number of programs. Housing and homelessness, and they do go hand in hand, but housing and homelessness is being recognized at almost every level, whether it be city, county, state, or federal, as something that needs to be addressed, and it's being addressed. Or it's just a matter of putting together the wherewithal where the rubber meets the road at the local level to go after that money, and to also go after the programs that put it into place.
When's the next full task force meeting?
We're not quite sure yet. What we're doing right now and how we're handling is we're letting the 4 subgroups do their work, and as they come up with things that we need to vote on, we'll probably have one in April. I think we're looking at the middle of April.
Okay.
And we're letting those subcommittees do their work. They meet regularly, and my co-chair and I, Carol Lehman, we try to get to as many of those subcommittee meetings as well, but we're letting them do their work, and we've asked them to do a few things, and they're doing it well. They're working very hard, and I can't complain about the effort.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to reporting on the next one and seeing if you move the ball any.
I hope so. I think we're moving it already, and I'm pretty sure we're going to move it some more.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Bob.
That's all the time we have for now. I'm Bob Goff. We'll see you next week.